Hey Jordan, morning.
Good afternoon, Trevor.
Oh yeah, it's morning here.
I forgot that it was afternoon until you said it.
Yeah, yeah. It's 10 o'clock in the morning.
That it is. I was operating on Singapore time until I looked at
Yeah.
the clock.
It's about 1 o'clock now on your side. Okay. Have you had your lunch yet?
Yes, had to think about that. Yeah, I had some food.
Was it like a burger or something?
Ah, come on, mate. I'm better than that. No, I had some Vietnamese noodles. Had some yeah, had some pho. Had some carrots, vegetables.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds
good boy.
healthy. Sounds healthy.
Trying to be optimistic.
All right. So I guess we got the outline of the discussion today. And I guess I'll take them through the first few slides and then I'll pass the time over to you once we hit the study planner. Is that good?
Mhm. Yes, that's good.
And it'll be discussion, right? So I think at any time you can always interject. I'll ask you for your comments, as we go along. I think that'll be, I mean, like what we always do.
Sure.
Are you gonna plan to show them the kind of like the demo framework for study planner today?
Uh, no.
You're just gonna
I
use
had
the slides,
had
is
to
it?
think about that. Yeah, probably talk about the slides, and then we'll talk about preferential allocation registration as an example of the student hub, because
Hmm.
the study planner interface is not yet fleshed out. I mean, we can look at the study planner if we like, but as we were discussing yesterday, probably best to keep to the current interface.
I mean, that time you showed me you had a mock-up on the mobile phone. It,
Of
it was
this,
like you
not
were
of the
like
study planner.
stepping, yeah, the study planner, the study planner. You remember?
No. uh,
It was like a mock-up that you did. I think it came from the development team that they.
oh no! That's in the slides.
Oh, that's in the slides. Okay.
Yeah. The mock-up's in the slides.
Okay.
Yes.
Ah, yeah, that mock-up. But it was the mock-up when you actually triggered it from your phone. It was quite cool because you could actually see the um like what it would look like on a mobile phone. I remember you demoed that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Was that in Singapore?
No, it was on online.
I think that was registration.
Oh, registration, is it?
Yeah, but same interface.
Maybe, yeah.
Same
It
interface.
looks
That's what I was going to show. Is that
okay,
interface for
okay.
the same reason
Okay,
because
okay.
we build the study planner into that interface. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I got mixed up a bit. All right.
No.
Sounds good.
All good. So they'll join in 5 minutes. Wonderful. I need a little bit of time to work something out.
Hi, Trevor. Hi, everyone.
Hey, hello.
Okay, we are waiting for Rachel.
Okay.
He's still in another meeting. He said he'll be joining us in 5 minutes' time.
Yeah, no
If you don't
problem.
mind, we just wait for a while.
Are y'all going to be in one room and then sharing a big screen, or is everyone at their own respective stations? Looks like they're in one room, or some of them.
Hello.
Hey, hello.
Hey, hello.
Hey, so sorry, we just have finished one meeting. We are all zooming in.
Okay, no problem. You're in one room, is it? Or are you all at your workstations
In
today?
our own workstation.
Okay, workstations, okay.
Sorry, my name I need to rename. Now is you see my girl's name.
Bethany Pang, okay. How old is she?
She is now is 13 now.
13. Hey, same age as my daughter. Which school is she from?
She is in Pei Hwa.
Oh, Beihua.
Mm.
Okay. Now my daughter is preparing for the WA.
WA, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, doing already.
yeah.
I think is Eileen joining? Yes,
Yeah,
right.
she should be. She should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Deng also joining.
I don't know who's. There Eileen is here. Hello.
Hello.
Eileen is here also.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Then
Ray Xiong is here.
everyone is here.
Ewan is here.
Here already. So I think we have a full team already, right? Rachel, is it all here already?
Laura, Ray Xiong needs another few minutes.
Oh, okay. Then we wait for him.
Yeah.
But from
I
our side,
think
it's only pay one.
only pay one, is it? So maybe Laura, I was thinking, y'all met Jordan before. He's done some demos before. He's our product
Yes,
specialist.
I think I see him.
Hello, how you going?
But
Hello.
Laura, do you mind just going through your team members here so that we can kind of know their roles, and then
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
actually discussing, we can actually be a bit more targeted as well. Yeah.
Sure. So
Yeah.
maybe okay, Rachel, you know already, right?
Yeah, of
So
course. Yep.
EB and Pay One is also from Rachel's team, so it's under my office. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to introduce you Dang. So I don't know whether you have seen. I think Dang
Yeah,
was
thank yes,
the
we met.
Yep.
yesterday.
Yep.
So she is actually from the project management office. So
Mm-hmm.
when doing the system implementation at time, then she will be very closely working with you all. Eileen, I think you also have met. So Eileen
Yep.
is more from the student management system team.
Yep.
She's more helping us with doing the business specification and sourcing of the vendors. Yeah.
Who's in charge of the stars now? I think you all have this registration, right? The star system.
The sounds Rachel, the team.
Oh, Rachel and the team. Okay.
But
Okay.
that one is an in-house system. So our IT is the one that taking care of the system if you're talking about the system area.
Okay,
Got it.
got it.
Mm.
So you'll build that in-house. Got it.
Yeah.
We,
So
we
you
actually, we actually have been digesting. I think the last round that we sent, I think Eileen sent us a list of slides that actually showed your current framework and stuff like that. So we will make some references to that today also as well, because I think that's relevant to today's discussion. Correct? Yeah, this was what I think, was it Ray Xiong or Eileen actually sent to me, and then ending off with the last framework tool, which is allocation-based system. Do you
Yeah.
remember this? Yeah.
So is it Rachel mentioned to you that most probably will be the framework too?
Yeah, he did.
Mm-hmm.
We were thinking even before he mentioned that. I mean, anyway, our system is rigged for that actually. So it's perfect for us because our system is actually designed for framework 2. Yeah. Your framework 1 was a bit of like a stopgap kind of thing lah. Like you're trying to plug holes into a dam that is bursting of water. I think that was your framework 1. Framework 2 is really a new way of looking at it. I think that's quite interesting that you guys are going to adopt something like that. So we'll talk more about that framework 2. And then present it from our perspective lah.
Can you show me again the framework tool? Because we
Sure.
have made some changes along the way, so I want to see which version you are doing.
And I think, Laura, if there are changes, we can definitely discuss the changes
Yeah.
today.
So at
We will
least I
have time.
know you prepare is based on this, right? So
For sure.
let me see. Okay, roughly there, I think.
Cool.
I think finally it is more, if you ask me, is one major key difference is we now allow the students to block some of the time slot, maximum of 6, but the 6 hours can be in 1 hour block that they can put in their timetable so that the system won't allocate to them.
Interesting.
Mm.
Interesting.
So
So
in case, for
Okay.
example, they have one afternoon, they must go for a part-time job, then they can actually block it so that when we allocate the course at time, it won't clash with their personal. Yeah.
So we have a
Mm.
we have an interesting structure for today. We want to keep this technical where it needs to be, but not too deeply technical. We really want this to be around your process and what
Mm.
will work for
Yeah.
NTU. And we think that there are two pieces that are very closely linked, right? And it shows in this process, which is the selection of the courses, and then also the selection of the classes or being allocated into classes based on time
Yep.
slot and other preferences. So we will show you multiple different pieces today.
Mm.
The course registration is not just selecting the courses. There's a whole flow that we will go through. So yes, the time slot selection is actually a great thing for us to hear because we have just recently, you know what, you'll see it. It'll be very exciting. You'll see it. I'm excited to bring it to you. It's something that we built since we last spoke. So it's really, really cool.
Okay. So based on the framework 2, Time Edit feels that you all can deliver, is it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna show you today because
Mm.
actually our system architecture is built around your framework too. That's
Oh,
why when we saw your framework too, we were actually a bit more like, a bit more relaxed because
Yeah.
the framework 1, okay, framework 1 is something, can we do it? Yes, but it's not elegant. It's not an elegant solution. That means 2-3 years down the road, then you'll be like scratching your head and like, why did we do this? Because you see, your problem, your main problem is not solved in the second block, right? Where 70% of vacancy is released, the pressure is still there, right? So your framework 2 is actually presenting a new way of thinking, a new way of doing things, which is worth to actually actually really evaluate that lah. Yeah, I think that's what we want to do lah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think
anyway, our top management already approved our framework 2, so we don't need to worry about the framework 1. Yeah. So
Yeah,
let's
lovely,
focus on
lovely.
framework 2. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it goes beyond just the system being designed to support a certain process. It's that the tools that are there, what you have put in your framework too, right? And the goals that sit underneath all of this around student experience and around some of the challenges that even we discussed when I was in Singapore. These goals, the broader goals, are met doing what we'll talk about. So we'll talk at a level that takes framework 2 fully into account, and then we talk beyond that. What is it that NTU is really trying to achieve? So when we get into the presentation, we'll spend a lot of time on these sorts of things rather than deeply in the system looking at config, because I think what's most important, and obviously we need your opinion to confirm this, but we think what's most important is that both Time Edit and NTU here, if you choose to use our systems here, is that you feel we can fully capture not just the needs, but the goals you are trying to work towards and the outcomes you are trying to meet. So we'll get there. I suppose it's a good time for me to ask, have we got everyone that we need? Is Rushong ready to go?
Jordan, could you increase your mic volume a bit? It's a bit soft.
Did that do anything?
Better, yeah.
Yeah, it's better
Bit
now.
better? Hang on, let me just do a bit of this. All right, hopefully that's a bit louder.
Hey, Ray Xiong is in ready. He's good.
Okay.
Okay, we're all here, right? Anyway, we're recording the session, so we'll send you the recording and the slides, so you don't have to worry. As per our normal procedure, we're all very tidy on this.
That's good.
Laura, are we okay to start and we can actually begin the session?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, look forward to it.
Welcome. Okay, so maybe I'll set the context of today's discussion. We are actually here for course registration and scheduling, correct? This is the right classroom that we're here. So the first thing we actually want to do is actually understand the strategic roadmap. I'm just going to walk us through this because NTU, we are actually having, Laura, we're having multiple conversations with Eileen and different teams, right? And at this moment, NTU is looking into curriculum, co-curriculum, scheduling, course registration, and exam, right?
Trevor, just before you go deeply, can I just quickly interrupt? Team, please feel free to really unpack this if we would like to. We have time with the way that our presentation is structured today to really make sure that everybody's on the same page around this piece and the content of what Trevor's discussing. So Trevor, you take your time, and NTU team, please ask as many questions as you need today. We have lots of time.
Sure, thank you.
Sounds good. And
Go
I
ahead, John.
think good that Jordan's setting the context. We're trying not to be too technical today, because if we start to drill down into the functionalities, I think we might get lost in the overall picture of what we're trying to achieve. So I think today is more like we want to present like, okay, these are our objectives, trying to meet what we think NTU wants. And we're going to discuss more on a high level framework, the workflow and the functionality, not drilling down. Drilling down, we can always do later, where we have, more detailed sessions if whatever we're sharing today is relevant. So coming back to this, we understand that now NTU is on this technical digital transformation journey, looking to curriculum, co-curriculum, course registration, scheduling, and exam. Reason why I brought this up is because while Time Edit is able to accommodate a lot of this, because we have an academics operations platform, not every not every product is meant to be a standalone. So I think maybe Laura, I'm not sure whether you've seen this slide before, but I thought it's just worth mentioning so that you can understand. So Time Edit is designed in such a way that it's modular. All right, if you remember, it's modular, right? You only pick what you need. But when it comes to different, let's say, requirements in a project, for example, like curriculum, you can take the module of curriculum by itself. That means you don't need to get the rest of Time Edits, TE Core or Viewer or stuff like that. You can just get curriculum. So some products are meant to be completely independent and standalone, because we recognize that our clients might actually have other timetabling systems and they just want a curriculum system. For co-curriculum, it's a bit different. You need a kind of like a mesh of the modules. So for example, you need curriculum, allocate, and study planner for it to work. For scheduling, I think you're quite familiar. You don't need curriculum, you don't need allocate. All you need is core viewer preferences, and of course, optional, you have auto reserve. So that we consider as a standalone. You don't need to actually get our curriculum planner. You don't need to get our study planner and all the other modules. And then you have your course registration. Course registration for us is not a standalone because it's connected to our scheduling tool. Now, if we really want to force it, can we do a course registration that's standalone? Not really, because it's all connected to the data structure of the core and the viewer also as well. And that's the same for exam. You can't, exam is a semi-standalone, because while you don't need to have the rest, for exam, you need to have core. So you need TE Core and you need exam. Jordan, go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if I could just add something to what Trevor's saying here, there's a reason that we don't want to try and force course registration, for example, as a standalone piece. And the reason for that is that we feel, like Trevor's saying, scheduling and all of our scheduling pieces, including student allocation, as you've detailed in Framework 2, are tightly connected to a good student experience. If you can't allocate students appropriately, based on a quality timetable, then the registration process is disconnected from what actually causes impact, positive or negative impact, on good student experience, which is the structure of a good timetable. The fundamental information needs to be correct. So for us, all of that is really one piece, and it can be part of a broader process. And we'll sort of show you some examples of that today, and how we think that might look. But yes, that's why we don't want to force that, because for best outcomes, we see that as part of a bigger process where you can make meaningful impacts on the student's experience.
Yeah, good. So I think while Time Edit wants to try to endeavor to make it as flexible as possible, for example, not everyone needs to get, let's say, the curriculum, and but at the same time, there is a certain logic and efficiency for connecting some of the modules together, right? That's all. But I hope this gives you a clearer idea. Now, for today's call, we're going to focus on course registration, right? And course registration has these three modules that I think are very new for you. We have not actually shown you this. We've talked a lot about scheduling. So while course registration definitely is including scheduling, we won't spend time on scheduling because you've already seen our scheduling. You know how it works. What we want to spend time on, if you can see, is the study planner. The study planner is what the students will actually interface with. That's the one that they go in and they select the courses, and then they start to choose what they want to do, whether it's the main modules or the electives. We'll go into that later. Then you have allocate, which is basically how we bulk allocate the students into your class so they can get an individual timetable. And you have register, where the students can actually register for tutorials and stuff like that, and have a lot of flexibility to do these things. So we'll spend time on these three so that you understand how that works, but not so much time on the scheduling itself. Now, I'm going to skip all this because obviously, NTU, this is your slides. You guys are very familiar. Ray Xiong, we did talk just briefly before you came in that our understanding is that now NTU is looking to adopt the allocation-based system, right? And I understand that allocation system is basically going to be quite different from what you're having. So there's change management on a few levels. Change management on your the way the students interact, because right now it's first come, first serve, right? But now with this allocation base, it's going to be a lot of a different experience for the students. So that is a big change management by itself. And then of course you have your big piece, which is your timetabling part also as well. All right. And now we're going to move into basically our proposal, what we think from Time Edit's perspective could potentially work. And when we saw this, we were actually quite happy because it kind of fits around what we have been building actually on Time Edit's side. Okay, before we talk about the solution, we talk about what we want to achieve, all right? So for Time Edit, when we present a solution, there are a few things that we wanted to actually be able to deliver, right, in terms of objectives, because you're not going to spend so much effort to change the system if you don't achieve certain objectives. So this is our first step at it, right? So Laura, this is where we drew the inspiration from your slides and from the discussions that we had. So the first thing, if we can have an outcome of reduced stress and anxiety for your users, right, which is the students, right? So minimize the stress and competition. Fairness and transparency. I think the allocation process needs to be perceived as fair and transparent with clear criteria for prioritization. And Jordan will talk a bit about that. How do we make it fair? Because you can't allocate, or the students can't select preferences if they don't know that the way that the system is being calibrated, is being fair to them. All right. So I think that's another thing that we need to demonstrate. Improve planning and forecasting. If we can create that information loop, then the system should allow the students to actually better forecast course demands and adjust course vacancies also as well before the registration period begins. Basically, you have pre-existing data that you can use to actually do some draft timetabling even before the first launch of that. Then you have greater flexibility and convenience. That's another key outcome that we want. Students should have flexible options, including the possibilities of swapping courses and class groups. I think that's the one that Laura and Eileen, you mentioned about the marketplace, right? They are able to do some trading and stuff like that. Now, we won't say that we're going to have a marketplace per se, but we'll try to get some functionalities where students are able to actually do some swapping or class groups or something like that. I think Jordan will touch on that later also as well.
We'll
Jordan,
definitely talk
anything
about
else you
that.
want to add on this? Anything else you want to add? Yeah.
No, just as we go through, obviously we've been very clear here around what some of these outcomes should be, and that we want to meet these for you, and we believe we do. As we go through, if you feel that we're not meeting these or you'd like more information, let's stop and explore some of these concepts. We can take that time today, or do some follow-ups as well as you like. Whether they're recorded or in online follow-ups, we can do these. So let's make sure you are really comfortable that we hit all these points.
Good. So the next one is stable and reliable system. The system should be robust. We did take note that because of the window, there was a certain time period, there was a lot of pressure on the internet connectivity and device performance. Again, that's something that we would want to overcome. Efficient allocation. I think this is where we're also going to spend some time today to actually show how the system can efficiently allocate courses based on student preferences and priorities while considering school requirements and constraints. The seventh one is timetable certainty. Students should have a settled timetable at a much earlier stage. I think that's definitely more desirable. And of course, reduce appeals, minimizing changes on the administrative side. So I think these are the 8 key outcomes that we were thinking we will try to solve as part of the proposal of our solution. So I mean, this is important because sometimes we get very bogged down in all the technicalities and we forget this is what we're trying to solve. So anyway, we will be happy if NTU can comment if that's in alignment with current of your goals. But I'll just have one more slide and then I'll open up for some of the comments. The other benefits that I think we will also try to achieve is efficient use of resources. So basically, be able to efficiently utilize university resources by optimizing cost enrollments and minimizing under or over subscribed classes. I think this is one of the key things that a lot of the administration always trying to solve. Minimize manual intervention. I think as much as possible for the registration allocate to reduce the administrative burden. Data-driven decision making. I think this is very, very key to the setup, because if we can create more data from the past years, then this gives us a lot more data for planning also as well. And of course, this whole new change should contribute to student satisfaction by providing a smooth, predictable, and fair registration experience. So I'm going to pause here. Laura and maybe Eileen and Ray Xiong, maybe you can comment on this. This is important, not as a marketing kind of thing, but this is quite serious because this is what we are trying to aim to deliver, right? And are we off the mark, or is it quite close to what NTU wants? Yeah.
Thank you, Trevor. I think you get the gist out of I think you hit all the important points. And I think if you see yesterday my deck to present to the top management, most of the things also there. The data-driven that part, it is important because now actually they don't have the past statistics to really help them to plan. So I think that one is
Exactly.
one. Efficiency, of course, the other one. Student-centric is another part that is very important, because actually that's why you can see, I think you can also get from how we want to allocate is we try to cater for their need as far as possible. That's why we also need to give them the choice and whether they can choose until the course level or the time slot level. But we also want to really give them what they want. So I think that is the balance that we need to strike in the system. And how, of course, when I talk to the students, when we engage the student leader that time, we actually say that, okay, how many choice you really want, but we also need to balance the system. Will be running endlessly and cannot come out with the result. So those are the things that I think, and on the technical level, we can resolve. But I think concept-wise, you get it correct that it is we want to support the students and, for example, reduce the appeal and all these things. You get it, pull it out correctly. That because when we can actually do the things in advance, we don't need the students to be unhappy and come to deal with it with an unhappy student. So I think those are the things that we really want to improve with this new system. Efficient use of the resources is also a very real case. I think I share with you that time. That's why we actually want to do together with the scheduling that part, because the teaching facility is getting tighter and tighter with our increase in especially PGC. So graduate coursework. So I think to me it hits all the things that I want to achieve. So good for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement. So now we come to actually how we are solving this. So again, this becomes at the forefront of our mind when we are proposing this solution, because again, our solution is very flexible, but now we know that these are the outcomes that we want to drive to deliver. So there are always three stakeholders that we always look at, right, from different perspectives, because it's not just Laura, your team, right? It's also the staff of NTU. It's also the students of NTU also as well. So from these three stakeholders, we do have very different way of actually catering to their requirements. So for example, the students, you will actually see course catalog, student selection, preferences and registration, book and request, personalized schedule, scheduling and feedback. What I mean by this is this. So for example, students, they will never enter the system, right? Let me go back to the previous slide. They won't enter the system. They will actually basically be at the front presentation layer. For example, at a viewer, if you see viewer here on the right side, or the study guide, or even the study planner that we'll show you. Now that is student facing, right? But for your administration team, that's where we will give you access to the system that you're able to actually control more of the constraints or the dynamics of the setup. Then of course, for the staff, not every staff needs to have every access to everything. They also can make changes and in certain areas also as well. Jordan, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, so I think just to be clear, when Trevor says that the students don't access the system, it's kind of like a house with lots of windows, and everyone gets their own window, and they see what's inside the house differently, but the contents are the same. And so students might not see everything through the window, they might just see the couch, right? But an administrator might see all the furniture, for argument's sake. It's the same set of things inside the house. And so it's the same concept with us. Everything is one central database. So all the information is always there, and you can then really tightly control what you show, to whom you show it, and when they should see it. And this obviously ties very closely when we talk about the process and the proposed framework. It ties in very closely with student journey planning. You know, when should they see things? What should they see? And so on. All of this is configurable.
Yeah. So let's go on to the next one, which is quite interesting. Now, this actually shows, okay, so you see how we think, Laura, is like, we're not trying to just take all your points and then try to force your points into our system. We're taking our system, recognizing the outcomes that we want, and then using our modules to fulfill those outcomes. So for example, planning will definitely be at curriculum level. And later we'll show you a bit of diagrams and walk you through that. And then you have the study planner. So Ratio, I think study planner is something that you never saw because it's actually a new product. And this is something that we actually will go live, Jordan, if I'm not wrong, by the end of 2025, because a lot of our customers are actually asking for that.
Yeah. First version before then. So we've run I think when I was in Singapore, and for those that were there when we spoke, I very briefly showed an example of the system we used in a pilot with an institution in Europe. So we had run that pilot with that institution in Europe. They have used the features that we're going to show. So we have tested these at scale, but we're bringing all of that feature into our new student hub. So it's in the same interface as you will see our preferential registration and other pieces in. We want it all to be in one place, all to be the same feel, and so students are given a really good experience, because the tests we did were functional tests, not user experience tests, and now we're ready to bring all of that together. So what you'll see today will be a little different to what you saw if you were at the demonstration in Singapore. It'll look very different in a good way.
So when you see the study planner here and registration, it's really the student interface where the students are actually planning their study journey, right? Exactly like what you're asking for, right? They are able to select their base modules that they need, the mandatory modules, and then after that, their electives or their double degree, whatever, right? And then the registration is where you're giving students the flexibility for class registration and student self-serve. So that's the front-facing kind of applications. Then you have the allocate, and allocate is a back-end kind of thing. So later Jordan will show you that's normally done by administrators, right? Where you're actually from your student management system integration, pulling your students into the classes. So I think that's that's why I said we're not going to cover everything because it's too exhaustive, but we will focus on study planner, allocate, and registration today. So we're going to start first with the study planner, which is actually the student planning journey. And I'm going to pass the time to Jordan. But before I do that, does this make sense to you? So we won't focus on everything. We will focus on the study planner, how it would look like for the student, right? So that means you imagine, right? The student comes in, they take out their mobile phone or they're on their laptop. Instead of first come, first serve, what are they actually going to be selecting? So that's the study planner side. After that selection is done by the student, then that's when you actually have all your data from the selection and their preferences, and the scheduler actually starts to actually make the schedule, right? And then allocate the students into the class. And then, of course, you publish that. After the classes are published and it's live, of course, during the semester, then the student has some flexibility to make changes or to change class or change tutorial. So I think that's the flow that we're trying to touch on today. Jordan, anything else? And if not, I'm going to pass the time to you to start to walk through the study planner.
Yeah, ready to go.
Okay.
Before you
Laura?
start, Jordan, maybe you can also share, I don't know whether it will be included anyway. It is, from my end, I think I'm more worried it is whether your new system will be able to cater for the different rules for us to assign and the hierarchy of allocation. So if you can cover that part, it would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
You.
Absolutely.
Do you want to take over the slides?
Yeah, I will do. I'll just start with the hierarchy of allocation piece there. All right. So just making sure everyone can see there, I've got framework 2 up on the screen.
Yeah,
Lovely.
you got to speak closer
So-
to the mic.
Yeah,
that
I'll
you're-
bring that nice and
Yeah,
close
yeah.
in. So,
That's good, that's
Laura,
good.
just checking there, when you talk about the hierarchy of rules that we've just discussed, we're talking about really on the third piece here, we're talking around what sort of courses are we allocating, in which order are people being allocated to them, and these sorts of things. We're not doing it necessarily all at once. People are being allocated into courses based on a certain sequence, on a certain hierarchy, and you're defining that hierarchy. Now, I can see that this is in order, right? We got core, MPE, ICC, and so on, and we're then allocating people with grouping information in that. Outside of that, and outside of obviously the course structure, because we'll need the course structure to be consumed as well. Are there any other things that you would like to bring in? Or any other things you are planning to bring
In terms of the allocation, right?
in terms of allocating to courses
Yeah,
specifically? Yeah.
I think so far, these are the major one, but I think yesterday when I talked to the team, there are a few, it is more currently is on at the course level. So at the course level, for example, this course, I will need to prioritize for Singaporean to go in to take the course. So then there will be such cases, or some are more communication kind of courses, then they may have some certain kind of requirement. So that one will be those outlier that it is not like the major allocation process, but it is a very specific kind of rules that they want to put in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's capacity for those courses based on the student's characteristics, right? Is that student Singaporean? And then other sorts of characteristics, like you've got here, study year, other priorities, and so on. So we'll explore how we can facilitate that. And we facilitate that in two ways. The first is at a course level, and the second is at a class level. Again, when we were in Singapore, I remember we spent quite some time talking about that distinction, in that we need this to happen at a course level and at a class level, because you want to distribute students within the class groups based on certain factors, but you also only want them in a course based on certain factors, as this diagram implies. And so we'll show you some elements of both. Any other points before we jump in there? I think I'll probably show rather than tell our controls for this, but are there any other things that you want us to touch on?
I think so far it should be there for the third phase. But if you're looking at the fourth one, there is one more rule. It is the students who are underloaded students. So that means it is the students being allocated with the courses which is still below their supposed AU the intake for that semester. So that will be another rule. So if I look at
that's fine. Yeah.
So
yeah.
my team, any input? I think that's all I see. Okay, so then you can continue.
No worries. So let's talk about some examples. Just going to move back to where we were before. So skipping through, fast forward. All right, we're back to where we were before. So we're going to start with Study Planner. And we're going to look at this in two different areas. I'm going to do the study planner primarily from our presentation today. As we've said, it is something that is in development. So just to recap, as I said earlier, we have run a pilot with all of these features with the university. We've tested these features with integration to a student system, bringing in student data and so on. So we have the experience with that at that scale. The next step for us and the current focus is to build that for two priorities. One is building it in a new student-facing interface and a staff-facing interface as well. That is in line with our time edit design philosophy, right? Rather than a testing interface. And then the second priority is to make it so that it can consume course structures from systems other than time edit curriculum. So primarily, previously, our pilot system used our curriculum system to bring in course structures and other information to say what a student should be able to register into, alongside information from the student system. But we're now building that to be agnostic. So these are the two priorities as to why we're rebuilding that. So that'll be, as we've said, before the end of the year. Now, this is kind of where we're looking at here. Now, there's a bit of a journey that we feel this goes through, and I think aligns quite closely to the framework to, obviously outside of the requirements specifically there, but the journey is that we bring in from a curriculum system, whether it's ours or another, we bring in courses modules, and so on. We bring in the rules, we bring in programs and degree requirements, and this informs the structure that a student will be provided with in our study planning tool. We also bring in some of the similar information alongside student information from the student management system. So where we were talking about students who may be, for example, receiving a different registration experience because they are Singaporean, then we have that information come from the student system. Other information that is relevant, of course, we bring it all in from the student system. In TimeEdit, every student can be their own data object and have their own information that's tied to them specifically. And we can have as many custom data values as you like. So your students could have hundreds of data fields that get populated from the student system and other places and allow you to then use that information during the registration and allocation processes. Yeah. We also bring in information around progression. This is where the study planner starts to come in. We bring in information from the student system around that student's outcomes, passes, fails, and so on. Is that student currently underloaded? So, Laura, this is where that piece comes in. The data that makes this possible, that progression information can be brought in via integration from your student system to say, okay, Laura currently is underloaded. She doesn't have the maximum AU, and you show up in a separate group, right? And then we can target, for example, in this case, we give you an earlier allocation period that you have access to. We schedule one that's early, and only people with underloaded structures can then go in and see that. Normal students won't see that until the next period when you have that programmed. Right? That's one example. Similarly as well, we are able to, because again, these are all TimeEdit pieces, all these green boxes, we can bring information from our curriculum system into our publishing front end, the study guide. That involves student information potentially, that involves passes and fails potentially, and information flowing directly from there into the timetabling piece. So looking at this whole process, we see this is really closely connected with the scheduling process, right? In order for students to select the things they want to do, that also gives you really powerful data to say, what should I schedule based on this demand? How many classes do I actually need? When should I schedule it? What do students want? Right? And you can use this information to create much better student experiences or to use the resources that you currently have in a better way, to reallocate resources so that more students get what they want or more students can be put into classes where demand is high. So one of the key differences here to what we had discussed previously, even in your framework 2, there are limits that you set for capacity for students for each course. And you want people not to be over-allocated into these. Once the limit is set, students cannot get into it. But what this process will allow you to do, as you'll see, is that you can capture that demand. You can still have your limits, and you can still stop extra students from being in a class they shouldn't be in based on the limit. But you can use that information to, in a really easy way, schedule additional classes or bring on more capacity to accommodate more students if you want to. If that's something that would be good for NTU, for example, if the course makes a lot of money or if it's a good thing reputationally for NTU, you may choose to use that information to bring on more classes. Or the inverse might be possible. You might have less students than expected, and you can take some of those resources away prior to finalizing the schedule and use them for other things that are more advantageous. That's what this system will allow you to do, and we'll see some examples. The last piece as well is around student counseling. So we'll talk around student counseling, student advice, and what our study planner does for that. So our study planner has 2 sort of key areas, which is the student-facing interface, where students see and can do things. And then that information can be used by people who are assisting students, student counselors and the like, to be able to provide them with assistance where required. So for example, underloaded students who might be consistently underloaded, you can identify them at a glance, get in contact with those students from this interface, and be able to help them if that's something that's required. Assist them with progression and so on. The key being improving progression outcomes for students. So that's what the data flow looks like, and that's how we see it sit across our platform, and that's why we feel that it aligns really closely with Framework 2. Now,
Jordan, can you
yeah.
Can you just go back one slide? I just want to underscore, I think Dang and Eileen and Laura, if you can see, although this diagram is quite simple, but actually there is a lot of complexity in regards to the integration between systems. I think that's one of the things I want to highlight, because it also affects your planning, right? Because Okay, so even from this diagram, here you actually have some source of truth, right? Your source of truth for your curriculum is in your curriculum system, right? And then your source of truth for your students is student management system. Your source of truth for timetabling needs to be the timetabling. Now, if these three are not set up properly, your peripherals like your study guide or your course registration won't stabilize because once you change your curriculum system, then you change your student management system, then it will affect your study plan. That's the reason why we bridge both together. The timetabling and the study planner are kind of like connected together, right? Because
Yeah.
it's related to that, right?
It's a good point. It's
Yeah.
more than that though. So each of
Mm.
these green boxes is a time edit system that you can procure, and obviously there are 5 procurement activities currently underway, right? So there are a whole variety of things here, and time edit is able to provide solutions for each of these, and with native integrations between them. So, as Trevor's saying, hugely complex integrations if they need to be set up between different systems with different data models. But this is all one platform, except of course for your student system. But we have integrated with the student system at almost every single institution that we work with. So more than 200 integrations with student systems, more than 20 student systems we've integrated with. So we're very familiar with that. That's not an issue. It's the timetabling to curriculum to other pieces, like Trevor's saying, that when these are sort of a breast of breed landscape, we find institutions have a heavy load in terms of the integration work to make that work well. We take that load by having native integrations between our modules. That said, it is possible for other setups. So these are some examples. You may have time edits, timetabling, and study planner. Instead of having everything, you may not use our curriculum system. You may use your own, right? Or a third-party curriculum system, or you may use a manual curriculum process. As long as you get the data into our system, we can utilize that. Similarly, you may just have the study planner and no study guide, no course handbook. You just use a study planner and our timetabling. But of course, as Trevor's saying, timetabling and that need to be together. And so this is what that looks like. We are able to facilitate those things, but of course, the benefit is in something like this, where we can provide you with steps 1 to 7, super clean flow of that data that starts to fuel not only a better student experience from the user experience perspective, but gives NTU data that you can use to make your processes flow better. For example, seeing student demand for specific courses or specific classes and so on, and being agile to that demand. And that's without the student needing to ask for it.
At an architectural level also, your data structure needs to stabilize also as well, because if that's not stabilized, when you're starting to change and integrate your systems, it's going to be a headache for the team, because you're then having to rejig everything every time you connect a new connection to the integration to the timetabling system and stuff like that. So just looking at this, because NTU is looking at the whole thing as academic digital transformation, it might be worth considering to actually start from the timetabling side before you do the study planner, because if your data structures are not set up properly, then even your study planner is good, then everything is not gelled together, in that sense.
Exactly.
So even that phase approach is very important. You can't like ask a vendor like, okay, give me everything at once. It's, I think, not gonna happen that way. I think you need to like kind of phase it out, right? And plan it out. Yeah. Jordan?
Yeah, we could certainly try, and we will do our best. But I think a key example of that, right? So to give you one very clear example, where you talked about the rules, Laura, those rules, a lot of those rules are enforced in scheduling based on who your students are. If you've already crafted the schedule, it's too late. Because if students need something that's different to what that is there, you need to be able to change the schedule quickly. And if you need that, you need a system that sits on the same database. Otherwise, it is too difficult to make changes to the schedule mid-cycle, right? And then students do not get what they want. And that is why we had a phased open approach and so on, with limited caps on classes. Whereas something like this allows you to completely remove the root of that issue. So moving into some of the demonstration now, because I think it's important we talk about this. We're going to look at the study planner now in 2 broader categories. So the ones that I mentioned earlier. So students planning their way through their academic journey, short-term and long-term. We'll see some examples of the interface. So that'll be the next cycle. So say, the coming semester, for example, and then all the way through to graduation, right? And what that might look like. And then we're also going to see the other side. So we'll see the data that the system can handle and what that can provide to staff members, say staff members who are in a student support capacity, for being able to do things like study counseling and planning, and what that can unlock for you. So we'll start with this. This is an example of the interface. Now we're going to see three things today, as we'd indicated. We'll see the study planner, and we'll see some allocation and some registration things. So we'll see the course registration basically, and then class group registration, because we see them as quite connected. This interface is the same all the way through. This is an example of our student hub. So this is what a student sees when they look at it on their mobile. They're only shown options that they should see based on the data that we have consumed. So Laura, where we've talked earlier around the course structures and the complexity of the selections, we can support those. And what that means is we handle the complexity in a rule-based perspective by having a flexible data model and native integrations. We handle that complexity there behind the scenes so that when the student gets their interface, they just see the options that are relevant to them. Of course, they see progression information, if they need to, grade information and things within that, but it's very easy for them to use. We keep this as simple as possible, because what we find is when the students are overwhelmed by choice, and in some cases even overwhelmed by information when they don't want it, then that can actively detract in a major way from that process. And so we see here, there are some clear information there around the specific modules they may be selecting from, and they can get more information by digging into that. For example, we keep these things very, very high level. We keep that at an overview level while selecting the specific modules here. So this is an example of some previous modules that they've taken that they can then dig into. They could also then go in and select more. So next cycle planning, it's quite simple in that respect. The same interface that you see here would be used for next cycle planning, but bringing in student information and curriculum information. So as we've talked about, again, going around to specific student characteristics and student data, we can then build the ability for students to plan their way all the way to the degree, right? So as it says here, the curriculum data is what sets the scene, that serves as the rule set for what I need to achieve a certain degree. And that might shift based on what the institution's offering, based on regulations. It might shift over a period if that student, for example, has to defer or fails or takes part-time study for a period. And that can then obviously impact what the student can pick. Our system is able to consume those changes in rule set. And then similarly, outside the curriculum data, you're talking about student information, right? And as we've talked about, the student system can provide things like academic history, grades, current progress, and these sorts of things, and act as the source of truth for that. But our system can then display that and use that in ways that are relevant for the course registration process. So, for example, here, seeing which ones are mandatories or electives, being able to select them based on which ones are relevant or which ones I have previously passed, prerequisites, co-requisites, all the fun things. And of course, as you see here, we can only plan, for example, future modules if we have completed prerequisites, as an example, as a simple example. So we have support for that. And that can get as complex as you need it to be based on the student data that's available to you. So again, to recap, the two perspectives that we really see a student planning at are the upcoming period, next cycle, we would say, and then planning the rest of their study plan all the way through their degree. Hence, we see here, I'm in, for example, cellular biology, and I would be able to see here what I've completed and see my study plan moving forward. Now, we'll talk about this in a little bit when we talk about the staff perspective, but one of the things that this unlocks, having longer term planning, is the fact that you receive student intent data, student demand data, years ahead of when you would otherwise generally receive it, in a way that is really rich and is informed by the expert in this, which is the student. They provide you with what they want. You can then use that demand data to either plan the scheduling entirely or make major changes to the composition of that schedule based on your student cohort makeups at a much further ahead horizon than you otherwise would be able to do without something like this. So this is the student-facing experience. We will actually go into an example of the system in a little bit when we talk about preferential registration and allocation and how that ties into these things. And we'll see some examples of how our current system is using preferences, which is, again, one part of your piece, time slot preferences and these things. We'll see that today. And you'll see that in our system there when we get there. Before I jump into study counselling, that's a staff-based interface. Just on the student interface, are there any questions so far on what we've talked about?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Alrighty. Team, if you are the sort of person who would love to chat questions in the chat rather than yell them out, that is also totally fine. Please feel free to do so. Trevor and I will keep an eye on that. Alrighty, so moving off now, away from the students, now I'm putting my student support staff member hat on. I'm now a staff member. Because of this process that we just went through as a student, because we've provided NTU, because I'm an NTU student, I've provided them with what I want to do for my next semester. I've provided them with what I want to do for the rest of my degree. And you have all of my information about who I am. You know, I'm a Singaporean student, for argument's sake, or maybe I'm an international student from Australia. I'm a working student. I have all of these other pieces of data that you can use and you can see to assess, for example, my likelihood of success, where there might be indications that you need to intervene, other sorts of factors that might be important to you, and you can do things with that data. Not just intervening, but as we'll see later, you can actually organize your student groups based on that data. But let's start with visualizing it. So here you see an example of our student overview interface. So this is the other side of the study planner. This is to say, I have a list of students. I can see whether or not they've completed a study plan in the first place. How far ahead have they completed it? Have they not yet completed it? If they have completed it, what does their average grade look like? Are they overloaded or underloaded? As we see here, Noah Brown is underloaded, while Jordan Wood is well overloaded. We can see the courses they're taking, the faculty they're a part of, and so on, and their general progress, and we can dive further into that individual student. Now, of course, we can search and filter, so I can just be looking at students at a certain area of the institution. Right now, I'm just looking at the Faculty of Biological Sciences, but I could, of course, be looking at the whole institution and pulling reporting information based on this. The wonderful part about Time Edit is we have a robust REST-based API, event-based API. So where we're talking about information like this, if you want to pull this information out via API and provide reports, if there are people in your, for example, the DVCA's office or other higher up areas of the institution who are looking to see how well are our students progressing, what are the barriers to student progress and success, you can provide this as part of the reporting. And that can be, you know, again, we'll have in-system reports at a later time once this has been completed, but at an early stage, of course, we have the API that you can use to build in your own data lake and pull that information out to inform some of that decision-making and information. Of course, again, this allows people to individually intervene with students. So if, for example, I see here that Liam Smith is 200% load, we have a problem. Liam probably shouldn't be allowed to do that. That would stop him if I set some restrictions anyway. But if I allowed someone to take on a 200% load, and they did, I might want to intervene and say, Liam, are you sure that's okay? I mean, he's got a 4.5 GPA, so he's probably pretty sure of what he's doing. But if this was, for example, a 3, and I see this and I think, Liam could do with a little bit of counseling, I can directly intervene there, do some outreach, and in advance of the student having issues. So before that student starts failing or taking on too much effort and so on, I can intervene here. So that's what this interface allows us to do. There is now another piece of this. So this is an existing interface here. This is our study combinations interface. This is one of the ways that we can automatically build in the scheduling process. So for those of you here that are big into scheduling, this is one of the ways that we can build our student clash control in the scheduling process. And because all this sits on the same database, we can see what you're seeing here is which programs of which pathways through their study have students selected. So each of these is a different unique selection of different courses, as you can see here. How many students do I have taking each of them? And based on that, generate a conflict control model during the timetabling automatically to keep things from clashing that shouldn't clash. So, you know, keep my core and elective units and so on apart and align with all of the rules that we saw in Framework 2, but from a foundational timetable perspective. So do this before we have students directly in the timetable. Because we're capturing data like this from the study planner, we can then build these structures using student demand rather than just forecasting based on, again, forecasting, which could be quite sophisticated. At some institutions, it's kind of like this, and they kind of just wait to see. So it depends on how sophisticated each area's forecasting is. But what we have here with the study planner allows you to get real information directly from the students. You're essentially doing a survey, and students are telling you exactly what they want, and you're then building to that. Now, of course, this is not just natively integrated into our study combinations tool for the purpose of building a timetable, but because it all, again, sits on a single database, it's able to be used for reporting and insights and planning. And that can also be leveraged for things like financial planning to see how things will align to budget and other factors, because this is such a comprehensive system. So again, not to go too far off the track of course registration and scheduling today, but if you were to utilize the curriculum system that we have that has a cost-based design and budgetary factor to it, for example, you might take this information and bring it back in to the curriculum system so that you can see during a curriculum cycle how popular really is this offering that we have. Are we going to align to the budgets that we have? Are we going to make more or less money than we thought? Should we change things based on this? And that can be done during the curriculum planning cycle. So there's lots that can be done with this information. As a last piece, we are building our new student experience platform as well as this study planner, and we have started rolling that out. So that is just started being rolled out, and we're now bringing bits into it. So the study planner is one of the pieces. Of course, examinations is another piece, our general class scheduling, room bookings, student evaluations. So where a student has taken a course and would like to evaluate that course and provide their feedback, that is also a piece. Any aspect of the Time Edit platform that you as an institution choose to use, you can enable for students the relevant student-facing interface to then bring them into that experience as well. Now, as we saw before with our modular approach, if you do not use a piece, it's simply not in the interface, and that's fine. So if you don't use our evaluations piece, or you don't have examinations in our system, for argument's sake, then you would not see it in here, and that's fine. It's modular and responds to what you want. Now, Trevor, I think this is a good time for us to talk a little around the study planner concept, because we've been talking about what is something that is in development. We've got a very clear understanding of what the needs are, and this is not obviously our first time. We've tested this. We're now simply building the back end for this and the front end for this. But there is an opportunity here for NTU as we see it. Trevor, I think you can speak to that.
Yeah, so I think, Eileen, you have discussed this briefly with us before in one of our meetings about whether NTU can actually be a part of that product creation, or that product feedback loop. And the answer is yes, specifically for Study Planner, which is really good time because we're actually going to be rolling out this year. There's still time to actually do this. So basically, the invitation is for NTU to consider whether you want to be part of this product advisory board. And maybe if you can go to the next slide, that will kind of give them an idea. So you're able to actually have a direct input into the product design and functionality. So it's not just a consultation where you're telling us, okay, this is what I need, but we're taking heed of like, okay, this is how you need it. And then, of course, the product manager can actually help you to shape that as we develop that. Of course, you have early access and implementation because you actually have the advantage of actually seeing how it will work at the early stage. The third one is by working with the product team. The advisory board members will also ensure that the planner addresses their particular pain point. So Laura, you've mentioned a few things. I think that's brought up right in front, even before you even deploy the system. So I think that if you can see, the last one is reduce risk, right? You can actually have an earlier implementation. All these things can be ironed out even before it going live. And then, of course, the last one is recognition also as well. You have a sense of ownership and recognition for your actually contribution to building that product together with Time Edit.
Yeah. And I can also speak, having spoken with colleagues around this internally, obviously this isn't something that we suggest lightly. This isn't something we suggest to all institutions. This is something we suggest to institutions who understand the problem that they want to solve in a really deep way and have an idea about how you want to solve it. so that this can be a beneficial experience for you as well. We would not build something alongside you that would not benefit you. And obviously, as part of that, we speak to our product team. And I can say that our product manager is extremely excited by the prospect of potentially working with NTU on this. He's really, really keen to see more of the sorts of requirements that you've talked about play out in a concrete way. So that's this piece. And I think another piece to add to this concept of our product advisory board is that we have extensive pedigree in doing this. This is not the first piece that we would be potentially co-developing alongside a partner. In the last 3, I would say, years, the vast majority of Time Edit's large new feature sets have been extensively co-developed with at least 4 partners in every case. So our auto scheduling capability, and now our second generation of our auto scheduling capability, our study combinations student conflict control generation that we talked about a little earlier. Those are 2 very clear examples of things that were extensively co-developed, rigorously co-developed across a global context. So, for example, the study combinations working with institutions in New Zealand, Sweden, the Netherlands, Australia, all at once to bring that together. And in some cases, Singapore as well for the study combinations piece. So really looking to expand that further if that's something that NTU is interested in doing and seeing.
Yeah, and just to add, of course, it's not just something that we're just mentioning. It also requires a time commitment on NTU's side because it requires a time from the team to actually think about what they exactly need, link up with the product management side, and then they explaining that, and then linking up together. So there is definitely some time commitment, but of course there are definitely a lot of advantages for this as well. Yeah. All right, so let's go on to the next one, which is I think the registration or allocation.
Yeah, before I move to registration and show an example of the interface and some of the things that you are looking to see in Study Planner working in some of our other tools, so you can see the concept already working in our system. Before I do that, are there any questions on what we've seen from a staff-facing interface or from the opportunity to be part of our product advisory board here for the Study Planner?
So far I'm fine. So I think for the study planner and link to the counseling, the concept is quite interesting. I didn't expect that time edit will extend until that level. I thought it is more still scheduling. So I think it's a good move. I guess this is very useful for the university, and especially we need to look at the student progress. So and personally, though I haven't seen how the system work, but I think the understanding that you actually take into consideration of all the data fields, how you integrate, and from the student perspective, course perspective, and other level, it brings some assurance that you know what you're doing in the system when you actually need to consider the rules. So of course, I haven't seen how the rules will be like, but if you have the concept to bring in those data, that means you actually have some part taken care. So it's quite assuring to hear just that part. So I just want to share this initial comment. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Laura. That's of all of the things that I could leave you with today, that is the main thing that I wanted to get across. And also tying that, we have demonstrated and talked about our curriculum system where we build those rules. So we understand the complexity of the rules. Bringing them in now is a data integration piece. And we have native integrations, right? And we understand the complexity of that. That's why we have it. So really glad to hear that has been impressed upon you. I can't wait to show you and the team something that is, concrete and built. Naturally, that's why we do development. I would love if it were part of a product advisory or a co-development partnership. Of course, that's something that's part of a later discussion. But I think that's why we offer it to you, because you also understand that what we're building is difficult, but it's critical. And that's really exciting for us too. Well, thank you very much for those initial thoughts. Were there any questions from anyone else before we do progress across to registration? Alrighty. Thank you for the thumbs up, Roshong. Love that. All right, let's get into registration. Now, some of the concepts that you have talked about in your framework too are around preferencing and waitlisting and swapping. Some of the tools that we have already in our allocation piece. And that allocation piece sits in the same student experience hub that the study planner will sit in. So the same features can be made available. As we jump in here now, we'll look at the registration piece for two reasons. One is to give you an idea of where the interface is currently at. And two is to start to talk about where we can see some of the impacts that we've discussed around student data and what that does to the process. So in our world, there are a number of different ways a student might be allocated into a course or into a class. That might be that they are automatically allocated based on student data. They might select some of these pieces. So it might be that they enroll and then they are automatically allocated in, and there's no need to register for a course because that's simply a core unit. And they select from electives, for example. That same process can apply for class selection, and we'll see an example of that. There may also be preference entry, and we'll talk to that preference entry. Now, what we can do with that preference entry then is visualize where the demand is at a student level, and again, like we were talking earlier, make changes to the timetable or to the student allocation experience based on this, and to see the outcome of this and what that might look like from a student perspective and from a staff perspective. So this is a quick example of an interface, but we're going to jump into the interface. Let's do that now. So here is an example of our student hub and that interface that we're in. Now, I see key information straight off the bat. This is preference submission. Now, this might be preference submission in one of two ways. As I said, it could be preference submission for general preferences around time slots and these sorts of things that you mentioned, Laura. So the piece that was missing, really, from Framework 2 is time slot preferences. You want to be able to let people do this, but have a limit. Let's see that. But also, this can be applied to classes. So let's start. I'm going to submit some preferences. Now, here are some preferences that you may show that we call general preferences. These are high-level preferences that should apply for that student, potentially across multiple periods. This is just what the student likes in terms of when they want to study or how they want to study. So my student prefers to study their delivery mode. They, instead of having specifically on campus or online, I'm actually more of a hybrid kind of student. I want the option to pick the one that's best for me at the time that's best for me. So I'm going to pick hybrid. Doesn't really matter too much. Time of day, I'm definitely a morning person. Definitely a morning person. I'd like my schedule to be compact. And I have a preference on the weekdays. I'd prefer not to have Fridays. I do things on Fridays. That's where I live my life. So I prefer to have these high-level preferences. Now, this, of course, was designed to be used for class preferences, but these are preferences that sit across wherever that student is. So if this is collected as part of the course process, that is totally fine too, because then when the student's presented with options for the classes that they might go into, and that could be part of a seamless single process if you'd like, then that student is only provided options that are meeting these criteria. But there's one more piece, which is the time slots. So I said I was a morning person. I said I don't like Fridays. So the system has said, well, these are the ones that you want to be scheduled into, and these are the ones that you prefer not to be scheduled into. And I'm seeing Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. because that's my time at university's hours. You might have different hours. You might have different limits. So as you said, Laura, it might be a maximum of 6 time slots where a student cannot, or says, I would like to not be in these slots. Now, as it's preferencing, you're generally not guaranteeing the student they're not going to get this. You will do your best. Because if a student has a lecture that cannot be moved at a certain time, that's the time for that lecture, for example. You may, though, do this process, and when we talk about demand in a moment, you may see that lots of students don't like that time, and you might move that lecture. So, and you might do that, and that helps more students then. So we'll see what this looks like. But for today, we're just going to lodge this here. These are my time slot preferences. So I'd prefer these other times to not be filled, but we'll see. It's very specific for me just to get Monday to Thursday before lunchtime. That's very lucky if I get that, but let's see. The next step, I'm presented with 2 options. I can't proceed here. You see, it's grayed out until I select one of these 2 options. I may want to submit specific preferences for specific courses or specific classes, as the process might be, or I may simply be happy with the high-level preferences I've provided. I've given my time slots, I've given my general preferences, and that's enough. I actually don't have specific things that I prefer over others, and that might be useful if, from a course registration perspective, the student is in a really prescribed program, like they've already got that selection in place because that's the structure of their program. But if that's a student who's studying something like arts with lots of options, they may want to provide specific preferences. And again, that might be at a class or a course level. So here we see a list of, in this case, a list of modules and a list of the classes for these modules. And I can individually, if I like, preference specific ones here. The same concept would be true there of courses if this were in the study planning interface. So here I have a series of seminars. And of course, when I click that, I see the information that I should see based on this. And I'm seeing morning classes primarily. This is great. It's prioritizing morning classes to me. And I can see information that might impact my decision, like the teacher, which campus it's taught at, the kind of room and so on, the delivery mode. But I know here, I don't want to learn from Robert here. I don't want to learn from Jordan. He's terrible. I would love to learn from Ellen, though. So I will take and preference Ellen. Now, I have in my system just now provided a single preference that I would like to put above the others. If you would like to, you can allow students to do more than one preference and to continue to put, preferences in a row. But here's something we've found. In Australia, it's very popular to do what we call stack ranked preferences, where you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But that is time consuming and it detracts heavily from student experience. Because what we're seeing is that students, we measure whether they get their first preference or their second preference, but they're only picking from what's available. From a course perspective, that's not too bad. But from a class perspective, if all of the options do not suit the student and they are not able to do things like providing time slots, then that student is only picking from options that are inconvenient to them. And their first preference is actually not a good thing for them anyway. It's not an accurate measure of a happy student or a quality timetable for that student. What does make it an accurate measure is where we then have things like time slots and general preferences on top of these individual preferences. So where I have done this, I might allow the student to go through and make some preferences here, encouraging them to do this really nice and easy and smooth process, right? So this is really happening in a couple of clicks. If I don't talk nearly so much, this process is about a minute. But now the student here is provided with a summary. How many time blocks and which time blocks have they said they prefer not to have? Of course, as we said, you had a limit of 6, so it would be 6 here or less. Their general preferences, and again, these might persist across periods. So if the student does this the first time, you may simply ask them, hey, in your first semester, you said that you prefer mornings, you don't want to do Fridays. Is that still true? You may not have to collect this every time. And then any priorities that they put in here. Of course, this is configurable too, so if you want to have a message down here to be clear to students that they will not always get everything that they want, then you can do that too. But now that student can submit, and that is done for them here. Again, we're talking about making this as clear and easy for students as possible. They can see their submissions have been done. They can see that right now they can edit if they want, but there's nothing they need to do right now. Their preferences are submitted and they can edit them up to a certain date if they want to. But it's clear to them where they are in the process. From here, the actual student process of any sort of preference submission has now been completed. The next step for this process is for staff, scheduling staff primarily, to be able to see what this data does for them. So let's now take off our class student hat and put on our scheduler's hat. This is an example of our allocate system where we can allocate students. And what we can see in this interface straight off the bat is here is a subject that we've got, our history and ringing economics, and we can see for each of these where demand is high or low based on our general constraints, our general preferences, and our specific preferences, because we're still here in the process of collecting preferences. We haven't closed it yet. We're still collecting them, but we can see where the demand is. And of course, I can draw conclusions from this. So if, like we talked about, you have some rules where certain classes should open only for certain students, as you can see here, this tutorial is only for students in business and economics. This one's only for retail management students. So we can tell that the demand is high or low because that's how many students we have from that cohort. It's because that cohort is quite popular. Great, that's easy. But here I have one where I don't have any dedication rules. I have some workshops. I have a high demand for the morning, low demand for the afternoon slot around lunchtime. So I can then start to draw some conclusions and to start moving things, if I want to better align to student demand. So perhaps a Wednesday morning class will be better than the Thursday afternoon class. Now, in our scheduling demonstration, we'll have seen previously, and we'll again show in future demonstrations there, that when someone goes to move something in time edit, you have a constant graphical visualization of any potential clashes. So if it were to clash on the Wednesday morning, then of course we would see that and you won't create a clash. You'll only be able to put it where it would suit for that student group. Yeah. But we can see in this interface that there is low demand and start to decide whether we want to take action and what that action might look like. And from here, directly send those things across to the scheduling interface for actioning. So this is an example of being able to visualize these preferences and to be agile based on that. Similarly, there's another visualization here where once we've completed the preference collection, so I'm no longer collecting preferences, I've completed my preference collection. I've gotten all of the preferences from everyone that I want. I then need to do some things. Up here, I've got allocation proposals, and you can see that I've got some generating and so on, some allocated. This one here is a proposal for a series of different courses that I've got, and I want to allocate those students. And I have done that, and I can see some information based on this. So I can see at a really high level, again, very clear, my students here, I've got 230 out of 257, for example. So these are the students I'm going to do is 230. Of those, 221 could be allocated based on my rules, and there were some that failed, and here is exactly why. Of course, if I want to get very granular, I can extract this, or I can open this up and see more. So I can see which students failed, exactly why they couldn't be allocated, who they are, and manually, directly go to that student and make some changes if I need to. Or, even better, I can change the rule set for the allocation and rerun this. So you can see some basic rules I have here where I do not allow conflicts and I am evenly distributing students between groups. I might have some different rules for a different job that give me a different result, or allocate my students differently that I'm happier with. And when that's done, I can hit allocate with the one that I want. So this allows me to do some scenario modeling of how my students will be distributed based on their course selection and class preferencing process based on what they've provided us, and then have them allocated appropriately in a way that I feel is really strong or aligns really well with the metrics that I set up to give a good student experience. So this is that registration interface there. This is the allocation process. So we've registered as a student now. So just to recap, we've registered as a student, and then our staff members have visualized that demand during the process. They've been able to move classes around if they want to better suit demand. So low demand classes, perhaps redeploying those resources for other classes or for more of the same classes at a better time or in better rooms with different teachers, whatever that may be. And then once that process is concluded, we've been able to allocate students based on rules and being able to see at every point of that process who was successful, who was not successful, and if not successful, exactly why, so we can directly intervene and resolve any of those challenges and have really granular controls over the rules that we use throughout that process. So that's that registration piece there. I kind of already skipped into allocation in doing a lot of this, and we've talked a lot about that too here. So before I do go too much further there, any questions on what we've just seen with regard to allocation as well?
For me, I'm okay. With my team, any question? Because this one drill down a little bit more detail about the allocation rules. Is there any questions that you want to follow up?
Got a big
Good.
thumbs up from Roshong. Loving those thumbs up. Thank you kindly.
Okay, maybe we continue first. Yeah.
Lovely. Great. So yeah, I think where we come to now is really where we're at in that process, right? So this is why we really see this as a broader process. As part of the scheduling that this is deeply connected to, you will create a schedule based on what students want. And that is captured earlier than all of this. That is captured in the student study planner. We capture what that demand looks like, and you can then build schedules based on that. If you've already built schedules based on information coming from your curriculum system or even our curriculum system, if you do choose to use it, then you can use the study planning information to better inform current and future timetables. You can use it to be agile and make changes based on demand while still accounting for the rules that you have stipulated. So rules around the structure of the course, like cores and electives and so on, and restricted electives and these other concepts, and also bringing in student data like nationality or other factors, GPA and so on, to be able to make sure that students are allocated to different groupings or different courses, perhaps only allowed to select different courses based on the information that you have on that individual student, providing every student with an individual experience. As far as the allocation piece there, I think we've kind of covered that now. We've really talked about what that might look like. And I think we probably, in our scheduling piece, go into a little bit more depth on some of the mechanisms in there because they're quite interconnected with the scheduling process. That said, I think at this point I will probably pause. Trevor, I think for our run sheet today, this is really the crux of what we wanted to cover. And we wanted to give time if there are questions or any sort of higher level questions, potentially around the product board advisory and other pieces, to really nut those out. Otherwise, we can give you time back too.
Maybe can you go back to the slide 21, where we can have an overview again?
Good call.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, what's happened is that we have just kind of walked, Laura, you and your team through at a very high level how we actually envision fulfilling the outcomes that we talked about at the beginning. So from the study, okay, let's put aside the curriculum, right? But from the study planner, which is what you saw on the student interface, where they're actually being able to select their journey, and then after that into the allocation, and then of course to the registration. What we will do is that, of course, we'll send you these slides because it might need your team to take some time to digest, and then after that, come back with us with some other questions. What might be helpful, Laura, is for you to consider at these all these levels. For example, you talked about rules for allocate. If you can give us a documentation, for example, all the things that you want to kind of like make sure that we talk through, that's something that could help us, because right now we are just taking from your earlier slide, which is the phase 2 slide, right? But if you have a more beefed up kind of like expectation on terms of like, okay, I want to, can your system do this allocation rule, et cetera, give us a list of that, and then maybe then we can drill down a bit more deeper, because right now we're not going into too technical. I didn't want Jordan to actually go down to the system level, but the next session we can actually deep dive a bit more into these things. Yeah, but you need to give us more information then. Yeah. Laura, your thoughts? Anything else you need from us?
I think for my side, currently I just have the slides, which actually also listed quite a lot of rules inside. Of course, there are like those cost level, that one I also need to dig it out and see what else. But if not, actually it is still based on the cost. But of course there are other priority rules which actually you may not know what is SFT. I don't know what anyone share about that SFT, because I just put, for example, SFT, right? So that one, it is like if the students actually did a survey on their past module, then they will have priority over the others. So that one will be another data that we collect.
That's cool. So you know about our evaluation tool, right, Laura? The one that I mentioned earlier for student surveys. We have a student evaluation tool that allows you to do that integrated with the curriculum system and bring that information to the curriculum process. That's see, these are really exciting things that we think, yeah, okay, student has done this. You bring that in as data on that student to give them an early access to course and class registration and reward the student. I love that. I've never heard that idea before. That's brilliant. It seems so simple.
Yeah, but of course you may need to be prepared that the data may not be from time edit. So it is like just now what you illustrate from third party or from our inside the in-house system. So because I think that one is under the other team, the system. So but the concept is there. So I can list out a little bit more. But we are actually will work on the business specification document, but more for our next steps also. So but that one won't come out so fast. So I guess to avoid some delay, we can illustrate a bit more in in the slides. Yeah.
Lovely.
So,
Lovely.
so I think that one, it is all the core things that we need to take care. And at least I can send you the final version also. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I will say, Laura, unless there are rules in there that are of a fundamentally different nature, so if it's different data points, that's not a big deal, right? But mainly these rules are in two categories: student data based, so it's some aspect of the student's criteria, you know, who they are, what they're about, that's all student information, or it's curriculum structure based. That's
Yep.
really the only two kinds of rules you've got there, and we have support for both of those. No worries at all. So if there's a different kind of rule, you understand what I'm saying, then that's one that we would love to hear about. But what you've provided us, if it's anything course structure or student information based, we have a flexible model to support it.
Yeah, that's why just now when I say I feel a bit more assured and I see your data fields, because I
Lovely.
can imagine you will just use those data fields to be the rule, which
Absolutely.
that's why I think it is feasible in that sense. So I think that's why the only thing I highlight it is that survey, that it won't be in the course and the student data. It will be the next information that need to come in, and that one will come like a bit more real time. Not say real
Yep.
time, it will be just closer to the registration period, because they will just close
Understood.
that, then they will feed the data in.
Understood.
So,
Yep.
so I think so far, but you also touch on the underload, that one under the study plan, which at first I worried that I see how you can actually extract, or but actually it's still based on rules, because it's total number of AU, then it is this semester you should take how many, then you just add.
Exactly.
So I think whatever can based on rule, I think you can do it. So and you have data
Great.
field, which I can visualize that it can be done if you're also confident that it can be done. Yeah.
Lovely. And of course, you know, the exact form of the solution is something that can be worked between the two of us in the longer term as well. So that's why we included the product advisory piece, because while we have rule-based controls, having that ability to input as to how you want those controls to apply and where you see them in these things, we can take that on board as part of that relationship too. So just to make that comment there. But I think,
I think
Laura, it's been... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
just one more comment. While I think the data fields are there, my only really concern, I'm not too sure is a concern to you, it is the complexity of our course structure. Because from what I saw from your interface, that one is like a mobile app like that. So it is the courses. I'm just trying to imagine how my students do that on a mobile, because actually there are quite a lot of like choices for them, and there's still different level of course type. So hope that that one you didn't take a very simplified version. So I think if you need more information on how complex is our course structure, then you can also let us know so that we can go
Yeah.
through. Yeah.
I think we've talked a couple of times to different teams at NTU around this specific point about the complexity of your course structure, which should not be understated. In different areas of this process, it becomes really important. You know, in the curriculum, in the rule creation piece, if it's a complex structure, you need complex rules to support it. In timetabling, if you need to bring in thousands of different combinations, that is something that you should consider. You should know, right? And we understand this because we have a similar situation at other universities. And a university that's quite similar in terms of complexity of these course structures is the University of Melbourne. And so we see a lot of these sorts of challenges we've already handled, we've grown through with them, and we're in a very comfortable position now. This specific one, though, around selecting courses in a mobile interface is a very good point. What I will say is, because we have had the experience now of all these other different interfaces of, if you have just this much data and you need to make selections from it, how do you make that as smooth and streamlined as possible? We are not naive, I think is a good word to say, around the fact that that's a really tough thing to do well. And that's a big focus for our UX and UI developers here. In, if you, like what you saw today was a fairly simple experience, because everything that wasn't relevant to that student has been removed. As much as possible is taken away from the front of that student. They're only picking from what is absolutely relevant. That said, sometimes you'll have students who have hundreds of relevant courses they can pick from. If I can pick any elective in the institution for a broadening piece, and I have 3 of those options, I have thousands of units potentially I could select from. So we need a way of making that smooth. That's not something that we are that is not foreign. That's not foreign to us. It's something we're thinking about. It's something that we're also happy to take advice on. So we've got ideas on that. We've got institutions who are like that. And actually, a funny point. When we did the pilot for this, we did it with a Dutch institution. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with Dutch universities at the moment, but one of the things that they have done is they went through a process where most Dutch institutions offered as much choice to students as possible. Like as much as you possibly can. That is your goal, is as much choice as possible in the courses that they can take. And so whenever there's a selection, it is to the extreme of the complexity that you're allowing students to take. The institution that we did our pilot with this was a Dutch institution and had that complexity built into it. And so it's not something that we are foreign to, even in our study planner. It's just a matter of making that really smooth in a mobile interface, which is that last piece. Not easy, but we know it is a challenge that we have to address. So, and we're already thinking about it.
Is just an alternative, or actually the students really can only do it on the mobile interface? Can they
No,
do
they
it?
really do it in mobile.
They only do it in mobile.
Some students do. Yeah, it depends on the market. I think different areas, different students have some different priorities. In Australia, specifically, we see a lot of students doing it on the mobile, similar UK. I think in Europe, it's a little more toward the desktop, laptop, and in Southeast Asia, we see a little more again. But we do see a high proportion of students. And when I say high proportion, I mean, depending on the market, anywhere from 40 to 70% of students doing the entire process on a mobile. And when we talk about complexity, I know we're talking about potentially hundreds of courses, but any more than 10 options, and it's almost the same problem, right? And we have that with classes quite frequently, where class registration, students may have 50 options, right? It's the same kind of concept they have to pick through. And we have made that still a very, very smooth process. And the vast majority of students who completed, I'll give you an example, University of Stirling, we had a first come, first serve registration process where it works like course selection. And the average time to completion was just under a minute, with the majority of students doing it through mobile. So selecting all of their class groups for a semester, the average time was just under 1 minute for a student from the time they logged in to the time they submitted every selection completed.
Because I'm just thinking it's like how they actually choose the course, then they need to see the different course type. They still need to see whether the AU for each category, and then see whether there's any clash with the timetable, clash with the exam. So seems to have a lot of information to take care when they do the registration.
yeah.
So I'm not too sure the desktop is easier, but anyway, I think it's that one we can deal with it. So I guess it will be good to hear also from your side. I don't know whether is it your next presentation part. It is. Are you going to ask the students to select? It is like immediately the course plus the time, or actually you want them to choose a course then the time. So I want to hear that part also.
Yeah. What would you like? This is one of the key pieces where we think it's really exciting.
For ours, it is actually they will select the if now the course selection by the students, they will choose the top 10 courses. So with that they will actually focus on what courses they want to get instead of like just a timing. Just nice. So within one course, we will actually give them 3 choice of the timing of the class, if there are 3, right? So they can rank. So because when we are moving from our existing process to this new one of the students' concern is they seem to lose their autonomy to like fit a piece, then fit the other piece, and they don't know how the system will go to allocate whatever things like everywhere in their timetable. So that's why we use the ranked preference so that they can actually, the system will allocate something as close as possible to what they want. So that's why it is by course, but within the course, we have 3 timetable for them. So when we allocate them the time, it is by time slot already. There's no phase of course at that time.
Yeah. So the fundamental difference with time edit and that existing process is the reason that those are ranked is because it may not, it may be set, it may not be set. But with time edit, because everything is one platform, so the student registration, the scheduling, everything is one platform. When we get students to, for example, pick a course, they can be immediately shown the timetable options and give their preferences or select it directly as you prefer. So you may not do preferencing, you may allow them to actually select it if you want to. And so these sorts of a different way of doing things unlocks a lot of possibilities to resolve. And this is where we started with resolving some of those potential root issues that you're seeing where students say, they don't feel like they have full autonomy and they're not sure why they got allocated. Well, they can see only in our world, they might select a course and only see what is relevant. They only see real options that they can preference or directly pick from because everything is already ready. And if changes are made, then changes are immediately visible because there's no sync time. It's all one platform. So it's all instant as well. Very, very helpful stuff. Lovely. And we will, the last piece, you mentioned potentially seeing that in a future demonstration. Yes, in our scheduling demonstration where we do cover more, we will talk about, for example, you talked about not letting things clash and how do we manage that in the planning. That's actually managed as part of the timetable because we plan out our student groupings and that is part of the clash control alongside a lot of other things. And so students are only given options based on a selection of options that are kept clash free. So you might have 5 options, but a mathematical calculation is done to summarize a very complex process. A mathematical calculation is done using all the student data to give at least one option that is definitely clash free for every student. They will always have at least one valid option. And the system's able to generate the objects that make that possible.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Laura, I have a few questions for you and the team so they can better help us to support you in the days ahead. First question is in regards to timeline. What is your timeline for this? Like, I mean, I'm assuming you need to also prepare the business functionalities, write the tender specs and all that. But what is your timeline to actually want to see it live, and happen?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think just before this meeting, we were also talking about it. So we haven't really fixed the time yet. But the initial idea, it will be nice to be able to launch it in semester 1 AY 2627, which is August to 6. Yeah. But
well and truly comfortable with that time
if it is too tight, then it will be January to 7. But it is a semester 2, which the time schedule is always very tight. So it is operationally, it is not an ideal time to shift the system halfway like that. So but if not, then we will need to look at the other academic year. So these are the few slots that we are looking at. But of course, we are, to be very transparent with you, we are also thinking whether there is one vendor like yourself can really do the mega system that with so many wish inside. So if not, then we will need to go for the bespoke way. So so that one, it is one of the options. So that's why the timeline we're still working towards and see which way. Of course, if I can understand that if, for example, your port system, you can mix and match and can fulfill our requirement, it can be a little bit more efficient than bespoke one. But I think this is roughly the timeline.
Okay, because if that's a timeline, August, like let's say August 2026, that means we actually on a very tight schedule already because the preparation of the paperwork plus tender plus the tender confirmation, we need to start. Any vendor will need to start at least giving them 12 months, at least a year for implementation. Yeah. So actually the work. So I mean, the other question would be, what is the likelihood of you trying to combine everything as opposed to carving it out, into pieces, and then releasing that, because that also affects the way we plan also for you.
Okay, good. So I think what I share, it is more our plan for course registration. Yeah. So but we are we are actually quite ready to look at the scheduling part. So I
Mhm.
think I heard you just now, it is like it can be good to start the scheduling first, then after that move
Yes.
the course rec.
Yes.
So and I would suppose the scheduling can be faster to implement.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
but I know
It's
that the change
more
management part, all these things will still need to talk to you.
exactly,
But
exactly.
system-wise, I guess it is a bit more independent instead of like a lot of features that need to fit in all the student data and all these things. So but if I run it first, it means you need to integrate, pull the data from my existing system first.
Correct,
Yep.
correct.
That's fine.
After
That's fine.
that, with a new system, then you will need to redo some part of it, which
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
difference is that your data structure is kind of like set already. So even if you change the system, the timetabling system will have the correct data structure already. So that's one hurdle done, one big
Yeah,
hurdle.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
If I may make
you
a
can swap out, yeah, you can swap out other systems down the road, but at least you get your timetabling system. The data structure is like the NTU data structure, right? So you don't have to keep changing that. Then the integration is quite easy already from there.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I think for me, I'm looking at the timeline. It is the scheduling and course registration. No matter whether I use the same vendor or different vendor, I may do in parallel. Starting from this month, I will start to do the business specification document or these things. I will suppose scheduling can come faster. So if scheduling can come faster, then we will start the scheduling first. Then after that, it is the cost rec. But of course, finally, we still need to see how the timeline can work out and which one
Yeah.
is more efficient use of resources.
Yeah.
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 If I may make a point, generally speaking, I think we've done a few transformation projects, so to speak, across the world. We've got a number of institutions we're working with, not just timetabling, but we're doing, different parts. We're doing some timetable and curriculum, some more than that, right? And some less. And they embarked on this as a transformation project. And if a learning from that is that timetabling is very important to select the correct vendor. If an institution, we've seen this a couple of times, unfortunately, an institution has perhaps already selected a different timetabling system with a more rigid data model, with a data model that is less flexible. They are then heavily restricted in what they can do with other tools because the timetabling system can't handle the upstream data that you want to use, like the student data we're talking about, or the downstream effects of that data that you want to use it for. It simply can't pass that data along because it doesn't have the ability to take that on. Or if it does, it's hugely taxing, both in integrations and labor. Whereas again, with time edit, that's one of our key differentiators, is that's the flexibility. So we found that from feedback from institutions who have done some of these, the flexibility of that system then meant that we could implement, say, a curriculum system and a course registration piece and so on. And they were able to do that with relative ease because they were already knowing, okay, this is the data that I need. These are the points that I want. I simply have the same information in the new systems and everything flows.
Yeah, there are two more other advantages of considering maybe putting the timetabling as a first phase, then after that, the course registration. The first one is actually change management, because timetabling, you're not affecting so much the student side. You don't have to explain. Basically, you still can have the same setup, but you stabilize your backend. The second really good reason is a quick win, right? Because then you're able to actually demonstrate a successful implementation. And that is like a very low risk, I would say, project, because it's like, I wouldn't say it's a no-brainer, but it's very low risk because we kind of know how to map out the thing, and the timetabling should run quite effectively. But once you start to do your course registration, that's a bit more higher risk because you're interfacing with a lot more stakeholders. They're going to be like, I didn't like this, I didn't like this, and then you expand your implementation risk already. So it could be one tender for both, but it can be implemented in phases. So the first phase could be a quick win, get the timetabling out as quickly as possible, run that system in so that all the backend administrators are familiar with that, know the data structure, know how it's set up, and then the second phase could be implementing the course registration. Yeah, that could be a suggestion also as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to add to Trevor's point there, I think Trevor illustrates some of the experience specifically in Singapore that we have with that change management piece, which obviously Trevor and the edit team will bring. But we also have some specific people who globally are really experienced from the institutional side at supporting that change and understanding how best to structure a project like this to make sure that the whole thing is successful. Because this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And you as an institution have long-term goals you want to reach. This isn't something you do in 2 weeks and then everyone's, you know. So I've got some colleagues here who I'm sure you'll meet potentially later in the process who are very, very experienced in that 20 plus years in HE doing these sorts of things and supporting these major projects. And so they're also able to speak to some of those success pieces. If that's something of interest, we can certainly bring, I've got one colleague in mind, we can bring her in to have some of those conversations as well, because Trevor makes a very good point from my perspective. It's really about making sure that whatever you do, and if you choose to use us, that we can help you make that broader project as successful as possible.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. I think it will be useful probably also at the later part of to hear from people's experience and what the things they're facing and how they actually deal with it. So I think thanks for the offer. Yeah, let's discuss, because we just got the approval of the process. We need to sort out what is our next step to do the tender and the timeline. But to be just very transparent, which may not be finalized yet, it is probably, I think, will be scheduling and the cost registration will be two separate one, because
Yep.
I also don't expect a lot of vendors can do both. So I guess it will be separate, and if the scheduling we can actually do first, which I think it should be able to do faster, I will actually roll out the scheduling first. Yeah.
Lovely. And do you think, based on this, obviously hard to commit, given that we're talking about something that hasn't started yet, but do you feel that the scheduling tender would be awarded before the course registration tender begins? Like, would you have decided on a preferred supplier before you start
Dang
the
has the
course
hand
registration?
up, so maybe I
Yeah.
need to let her share with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dang.
Yeah.
Yes, I just want to check, right? You mentioned about the timetable. Maybe I forgot about it. How long does it take for yours to do the implementation based on certain scale? Like, maybe you can give me an example. I need to understand
Yeah.
the timeline for the implementations as well.
Yeah. I can give you 2 examples. So we can go anywhere on the sort of a spectrum, right? We're very, very, very quick. Our fastest one that I've ever seen has been 5 weeks. And I've seen one that's gone for 72 weeks. Not because it was delayed, but because the institution wanted it to be a very long and thorough project. It depends on what you're looking to achieve in the project. But what I will say is, if it is a phased approach where we start by getting in the basic structure, and then over a period, we then add in more things that you're looking to achieve, then that can be done faster. For that phase 1, we can get you operational with our scheduling pieces quickly, and then add in more things, like, for example, room bookings and student registration as subsequent phases over a period. If you want to do it all at once as a broader transformation project, obviously it takes longer. So to give a bit of a scale, I think, Trevor, it's probably fair to say something like 3 to 4 months for the first instance, where we start with a phased approach. Yep, there you go. 4 months minimum to timetabling readiness. So that would be more of a phased approach. And then a longer approach, if you would like to do one that is more, everything in one project, more comprehensive, could be 12 months if you wanted to do it that way. But that's how you want to do it. We go with what you want.
So then if you can see this slide, this is just an example, right? We don't do everything in sequential order. We can actually set up the configuration in parallel with sometimes the integration support, right? And then we can compress the timeline also as well. The other things that we can trigger, depending on the level of desire of compacting the time, is that we can deploy more implementation managers as well. But all this also requires your team on your side to commit to the time to the project also. So it also depends on whether they have the time to actually interface with us, to implement the project. But this gives you a rough idea of, just for core and viewer, kind of like the spread of things. Yes, Dan, you have further questions?
Okay, that's it. Good
Yeah.
enough for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But you see the other task, right? So one part of it, Laura, is actually the blue thing, is where we need a lot of time to actually map out your requirements properly and future-proof it, So it's not like what you have now, but what I want in the next 5 to 10 years. And then on top of this, because we're not integrating into your systems, we need to do some data migration, because if not, we can't test the system. We need your actual data for that, and then to set up the data fields. So all these things, that's why I said, as what Jordan is saying, it needs to take time. And this actually is a very, I wouldn't say it's a simple process. It's already complicated because you're involving a lot of stakeholders. And then especially if you're getting your different faculties to schedule, decentralize it, we also need to train them also as well. So all this actually adds a lot of complexity, even just implementing your scheduling system, let alone engaging the student side, for other things. Yeah. So but I can send you this also as well, give you a good idea on that. Yes, Dang, anything else?
Yeah, that's good.
Good. All right.
Lovely. Thank you all
So-
very, very much for your attention. I understand we've done a lot of talking today and you've had a lot of wonderful questions. Really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much once again. And we're more than happy if you have follow-up questions after the recording. Please let us know. We will answer those questions for you, whether in writing, recordings, follow-up sessions, whatever you prefer.
Okay, and thank you very much. I think it's a lot of good effort has put in to address our needs. I really appreciate that. So so now it is more, you need more business requirement from us, is it?
Actually, the question is back to you, Laura.
Mm,
We are happy to do quite a lot of things, but you need to direct our efforts. So you tell us what you need. If you need more assurance in a particular area, so for example, you say, I saw this, but I don't still understand this clearly. How does the whole flow work? We can then spend a bit more time to unpack it, walk your people through the system. So you got to tell us what you need from us, and then we'll prepare accordingly. Yeah.
yeah, actually, after seeing today, I still have the question mark on how you will allocate the based on the student selection. Just now I mentioned about they select the course, they select the time. Of course, this one it is just I put in a way, right? But we can have different ways to do things. So I don't know whether we will achieve the same goal, but in your system, you will need to do in a certain way. So that one I actually want to understand a bit more clearly, maybe a little bit in details, how actually you will allocate. Because for me, I will just think of, okay, the students put in the course, then within each course, then select 3. Then after that, my system will just turn by the hierarchy and all these things. Then this is the number, then the school can adjust. So, but maybe from your system angle, it is, yes, I will still achieve that, but my way, it will be, no, you would actually choose a course first, then how the system. So I just want to see whether your system will do in a different way, or as plainly as what I mentioned is exactly what your system do, then I just need to know. So that part I still have the question mark. So if I can, I want to hear a bit more.
I think, Jordan, I see two perspectives here. One is that NTU has kind of like a way that they are very used to, and the other perspective is that we could improve that workflow also as well. So maybe we might need to present from both sides. One perspective is like, okay, NTU, this is exactly what they want, and then we could also present from our perspective how it would look like maybe on a better workflow. Would that be?
I think, Laura, let us take
okay?
that away
Yeah.
and turn that into something for you. But I agree with Trevor to a degree. I think we'll present you with multiple models and we'll show you exactly how it works when we allocate students in different ways. We'll show you what the mechanisms are so that you can see that. But I don't think it's actually much more than what we saw today. There is a little bit of ta-da, like you were saying, because we build the rules and then we tell it to allocate, and it will allocate based on the rules we build. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a follow-up for sure.
Yeah, but I got it. I know what to do to follow up. Eileen, you have a last question, and I guess, Jordan, we got a split soon. We got another call. Yeah.
Sorry, it's not a question, but it's my suggestion of a follow-up. So I think we've all heard from Laura what is missing in terms of what she's understanding. I would be keen rather for time edit to actually do, because thank you so much, Jordan. I think you walked us through, but we saw a lot today mainly based on presentations. But I think you have the information from us in terms of our framework too and how we're looking at. So actually, rather than jumping ahead to arrange for any follow-up meetings, I would like to request for time edit to give us actually an in-system demo video running through from a student perspective as well as from a staff perspective, based on your understanding of the framework that we are looking to implement, how would it look like, so that the team, Rachel and Laura, can understand how the student experience would be like, and how the staff experience would be like in terms of managing this whole process within Time Edit. And then
For sure.
after we review, then we can follow up with further questions and so forth. But I think I would want that video. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a limitation in that, Aileen. We'd very much love to do that, but we are in a development phase. So this is not a system that I can jump. Otherwise, I would today have jumped in system and shown you that there. This is not a system that I am fully able to walk through at this time exactly. So I'll need to take that away and get some additional pieces there so that I can come back to you with some recording on this and what that looks like. We will do that as quickly as can.
Jordan, don't worry. I roughly got what Eileen needs. I'll just work with you. I roughly know how because I think we need to help them to conceptualize.
Yeah, for sure.
Way. Yeah. So I think that's not a problem. We can put it together. Yeah, easy.
Lovely.
Yeah, Dang, last question.
Yeah. Also, from what you present, I understand that we have a group of the end users, but I think you've been involved with the institutions. You know that there's a lot of changes, a lot of things that it's not really just when you implement it, it will be there. So I don't see the flexibilities of the system itself when they come to the changes. I put these questions to you guys, how you are going to present it and show us in terms of the flexibilities of the system itself when it comes to the changes, or when we need to amend here and there. That is something that is still really not clear for me in this case. Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe you
And we
can
will,
talk and
yeah.
come back to us on
Yeah.
that part. That will help as well.
Yeah,
Rather
that's
than
good.
because if you go into that is part of the functional, I understand that you're trying to address Laura help, but I think whatever, so the system that we are looking at, it should be flexible, support the business need, because it's very dynamic here.
Yeah. So I understand this. Again, today's objective was to present at a high level, conceptual level and architectural and workflow level. Now we can actually start to drill down a bit more, and I understand what we need for the video. So maybe Jordan will have a separate conversation on that. Okay, sounds good.
Lovely.
So
Thank
sorry
you
we
all
got
very much once
we
again.
got a split. Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Eileen, thank you. Rachel, thank you. Dang, thank you. Thank you all the great questions. We'll send you the slides and the recording also as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
very much.
Bye.
Yes.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.